Hello, everybody. Welcome to an episode of Biblio Files, the little show on AADL TV, brought to you by the Ann Arbor District Library, where we discuss one fresh topic each week or every so often, all about books. My name is Amanda, and with me, as always, is Lucy and Christopher. And this week we are discussing banned and or challenged books. Now, I know there are a lot of lists online. There are a lot of ways people challenge or try to ban a book. We didn't assign ourselves a specific list or a specific only banned books, only challenged books. We have no specific definition of that we are going by for today's episode. We just wanted to pick a few different books that have been banned and or challenged for a multitude of reasons. And there are a lot of books that have been banned and or challenged over the years. And what's fun is that some of the books that end up on some of these lists that want to be banned or challenged are books we've already discussed on Bibliophiles, which is pretty great. And honestly, books are banned or challenged more often than we might think. And there are books that we've already read and didn't even think twice about that have been challenged. So it's a pretty interesting topic, and I'm excited to see what everybody picked to discuss today. So Lucy, why don't you start us off?
Sure. So I have a graphic novel. This is called Genderqueer, and it is by Maya Kobabe. And this, in 2021, this became the most banned book. And I think part of the reason for that is that, like, if you're doing a search, like these two words are going to bring up flags for sure. And then it's a graphic novel. So those might be two reasons. But so Maya Kobabe uses the pronouns er, which are called the Spivak pronouns. And this story is, it's a memoir, sort of the story of growth and self-understanding. It's about identity, how painful and agonizing it can be to be different or not to fit in. And Maya is really struggling with gender in modern culture. From a very early age, E is really uncomfortable being assigned female at birth and truly uncomfortable with the whole concept of gender. There's an excerpt from Air Childhood Diary where he says, "I don't want to be a girl. I don't want to be a boy either. I just want to be myself." So figuring out what M-self is like what the crux of this book is, essentially. Maya was homeschooled. So as a tween and a teen, he had difficulty fitting in anyway because of that unusual situation, and always felt like he was missing something that everybody else kind of was understanding or getting. Felt behind everyone else. And taking that same lens and looking at gender, you would just wish there was like a third option. It doesn't make sense to just have these two. So it's a really interesting story about how someone has to go through these steps to try and find the right words and also to figure out who they are. It's also a good read for anyone who wants to learn about non-binary identities, while keeping in mind that this memoir is just the story of one person's non-binary identity. So when he begins to ask people to use their chosen pronouns, it's with the understanding that people will make mistakes. Maya knows that right up front. But some family members question their choice. So Maya explains, if people could switch to thinking of me as gender non-binary, that would be amazing. But the only way I can think to initiate a switch is thinking to start with a switch of words. So he is so honest and open in this book about the entire experience from, being about 10 years old to now. And when he decided to come out as non-binary and use these Spivak pronouns, he had a really difficult time explaining to people what he was trying to do. And this is where this came from. And this is like the story that explains that. And, I think it's like a lot of LGBTQ books that are on these banned lists right now. I read an article in New York Times about this book, written really recently, but about how it's like one of the, right in the middle of this whole banned controversy. And in the New York Times article, they only talked about Maya as Maya. They never once used air pronouns, even though they said what they were at the beginning. So that was actually really interesting to read that. But parents have said they're banning this book for its explicit content, but it's really not that explicit. It's just a person figuring out their sexuality, and that might mean sometimes engaging with other people. And even the parts that talk about sex are very personal. They're important to the story, and I think they're important for reasons of representation. Like, if kids can't see how other people are interacting or figuring things out that they might be going through, then they're going to think that they're alone in whatever it is they're feeling. And I think that that's one of the biggest problems with any book being banned or challenged, is that whatever the reason it is for being banned or challenged might be removing something that would help somebody figure out or see themselves in a book. So I watched an interview with Maya where he said if he had had a book like this during the whole coming out experience, that it would have taken 10 years of confusion and uncertainty out of our life. So that's why it's important to have these books. And that is my banned and challenged book. Christopher, what did you pick?
Well, of course, I wanted to start with something very personal to me. When I was in school growing up, the books of Dungeons and Dragons were considered satanic. There were literal book burnings in my town, and I was told at a public school that if I ever brought the books to school again, I would be suspended. So I have a kind of personal relationship to this topic. It also, that experience, among others, left me with a lifelong suspicion of grown-ups and their motivations and their rationale for doing things. I did not pick that, though. I chose a book that came out in 1961. It's Roald Dahl's James and the Giant Peach. And the edition that I read had beautiful, beautiful illustrations by Nancy Ekholm Burkert. And I'll never forget looking at James' face with those deep black eyes. I don't know if either of you have read that edition or seen those illustrations, but they're all very haunting and beautiful. Probably most of you know the story of James and the Giant Peach, but James lives with two cruel aunts, and through some magic, a peach grows to gigantic proportions. Some insects get in there, and they have many, many adventures. The book has been challenged from school systems and local municipalities all over the country. There's some mild profanity. The word ass shows up. There is tobacco and alcohol use that shows up. There is the spider is licking her lips in what is considered to be a very sexual way. It's also been accused of racism because of one line in the book. So I think it's interesting that children don't really focus on these aspects. I had no idea that ass was in the book. I don't even remember the tobacco and alcohol use or anything else. And it just makes me wonder a little bit about the motivations for even challenging a book like this. I think sometimes parents are so hyper nervous or aware or just fearful of things, and children are much more able to discern, what the story is and what's important. I think children are often less influenced by things that they read. just because you read something doesn't mean you're going to do it. Kids are a lot smarter than that, in my view. But anyway, that is my selection for today, 1961 Roald Dahl's James and the Giant Peach. Amanda, what did you pick?
Well, before I share my selection, I'll just quickly piggyback off of what you just said. For some younger kids who are reading these books, they don't know that what they're reading is objectionable until an adult tells them or an adult removes it from them. So I just think that's interesting. And this is a huge discussion and topic and debate across literature. And the word banned books is very hot right now. So we're just touching on a couple of books and a tiny topic. So it's an interesting topic to explore further. So the book I chose is a 2005 novel. It's a teen novel called Looking for Alaska, and it was written by John Green, very popular teen author or YA author. He is not a teenager. This book won the Prince Award for, it's like the best teen book that year. It was published in 2005. And according to an ALA list of challenged books, this book was the most challenged book in 2012. And it also appears in their top 10 list for 2013 and 2016. And some of the reasons that were cited for each of those years: offensive language, sexually explicit and unsuited for age group, drugs, alcohol, smoking, sexual experimentation. And all of those things do happen in the book, and they happen a lot. It's very teen focused, and those things, the teens are doing them throughout the book. So I personally read this book in 2008, so a few years after it came out. And I don't think this is the best John Green book. I don't think it's the best fan book I could have chose for today. But I have a personal relationship with it because when I read it in 2008, I was new to reading like really good YA fiction. And it wasn't as popular or buzzy, or there weren't as many amazing books now as there were in 2005, 2008. So for me, this was the first book I read where I'm like, wow, these are real teenagers doing real things. I was very into the story. And after reading this one, I decided I wanted to read every book that he wrote as they came out, and they did. And after reading so many, and after having gone from 2008 up to 2022 now, a lot of his books are similar in character and style and story. They're very similar. So I feel like if I would have read this book today versus 2008, I've already read like 100 other YA novels between the years to compare it to. But at the time, I just thought this book was so rich in detail, and it's also very heartfelt and morose, and it has a lot of like very impactful things that the teens are going through that a person can take. Also, this author has he's only, what does he have, 6, 7 novels, and a few of his other books are also on many of the banned and challenged lists too. So it's just interesting. But again, it's for teen behavior, like things you wouldn't want, like, to read about, like smoking and sex and that kind of thing, and drug use and suicide and that type of stuff. So for this book, there's a young teenager named Miles, and he is at home, and he is being sent off to the same boarding school that his father went to. And not much is going on in his life, and he likes reading, and he has this idea. There's a quote from a poem, The Great Perhaps. And so he, as a teenager, part of his evolution of like trying to find the world in himself is he's searching for the great perhaps, which is a cool concept. And I felt like that when I was a teenager too. I was always looking for that thing. So he heads off to the boarding school, and then he meets Alaska Young. And Alaska is the girl of his dreams. And here's the description of her. She's gorgeous, clever, funny, sexy, self-destructive, screwed up, and utterly fascinating. And she's like a tornado in this book. She is just a burst, and she's so exciting and different for Miles. And he becomes friends with his roommate and a few other friends in the school, and they have a lot of adventures. They play pranks on various people and buildings. In the books, that is the main thing, is them up to shenanigans, like smoking, drinking, and playing pranks. So they're up to no good, which is kind of exhilarating to read. I would have liked to read this as a teenager, because it would have been like, oh, look at them, because I didn't do those things. So it's like, oh, look at them. They're smoking in the middle of the woods. So for this book, the way the chapters are written is they're written as like 100 days before, 46 days before, 3 days before, and then there is a life-changing event that happens in the middle of the book. And something is coming because something is coming, and then there's an event, and then the book heads out to like, 10 days after, 7 days, or 6 days after, 30 days after. So there's like what happens after and how the characters are dealing with those things that have happened. And I won't mention what it is, but it's impactful, and it's big and huge, and it has a lot of there's a lot of emotions and feelings that some of the characters are going through. So I won't go into that. But yeah, I really At the time, I just loved this book. I think if I read it today, I would have a different reaction to it. But I think it's definitely one of those books that's on many of these lists for the content that's in, and I think it's a good representation for some of the reasons that other YA books are being banned for, is for teenagers doing teenager things that you don't want teenagers to be introduced to, but sometimes they already know these things before they're reading the book because they're like, this is geared towards age 15 to 18. But it also won the Prince Award when it came out in 2005. So there was a group of librarians who got together and voted upon all of the books that came out for teens that year, and they voted this the best book. So it's also always cool when a debut book by an author comes out and then wins such a prestigious award like the Prince Award. So I think that's pretty cool, and it's a good nod for John Green and his writing. Yeah, so that is my bit of a ramble. Not so much plot, more of like my reaction to it. But that is John Green's first book, Looking for Alaska. So do we have any other final thoughts on that book or any other banned books or challenged topics you want to talk about today, guys? No? All right. Well, if there's a book that you're thinking of reading that maybe is banned or challenged, or if you've read a book and you're thinking, hey, I wonder if this was on any list, just pull up a couple of lists of banned books or challenged books and see. Because some people in their reading, they just read these books because they want to read these books. And they're like, wait a minute, Harry Potter is on all these lists. What? And it's just a fun way to see what some people are trying to take away from other readers that they don't think should exist. So that is our discussion today on banned and challenged books. Thank you so much for joining us. If you have any books that you've read that are banned, challenged, or just some really cool books you want to tell us about, please let us know. If you click the link below, it'll take you to the library's website and you can drop in a comment there, and we look forward to seeing what your suggestions are. So that's it for this week, and we will see you next time.